AI Mentors is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Our podcast, AI Mentors, hosted by Mark Kelly, brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success, and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI Mentors cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career.
Welcome to the AI Mentors podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kelly. Today's guest is Alex O'Connor. Alex is the lead data scientist at Digital Help at the e-commerce group within Autodesk. Alex, pleasure to speak to you today.
Hi there, Mark. Nice to see you.
So how does an Irish guy end up in San Francisco, all those thousands of miles away? I know there's a little bit of a funny story behind that, so we might start with that first if we can.
Absolutely. So when I moved out here, I started in a job in Menlo Park, which is down near Stanford. And my fiance at the time was living in Washington, D.C. So after I got established, which took a couple of weeks, I actually flew out to her on a one-way ticket, and we drove back from Washington, D.C. across 13 states to California. And I have to say it was one of the most extraordinary experiences because along the way, we saw desert, we were in a blizzard in a mountain in Wyoming, we saw Salt Lake City in Utah, and probably the highlight of the trip was we got to see Mount Rushmore and the Crazy Horse statue. And both of those are these epically sized monuments that you would never think were real, that you only ever see in movies, and that, you know, when you actually get to see it, were an extraordinary experience. So it was 5.5 days in a car, and it works out at about 2.5 laps of Ireland, if that's the equivalent, that can make sense. So yeah, truly an epic experience.
I can relate to it. I didn't drive though, but I did coast to coast on an Amtrak train across America over 30 days from New York to Florida, New Orleans, day and a half through Texas. Wow, that was some journey. And then right up through to San Fran, and then we went through Bakersfield to Vegas, Chicago. So you just, Texas is 50 times the size of Ireland. You know, it's bigger than Europe. So it just when you put these into perspective, it's gigantic. So Alex, tell us a little about your role, what you're doing day to day. And before I actually start the interview, I just want to say that all Alex's views are his personal views and comments. They're not reflective of Autodesk. So tell us a little bit about what you do day to day, the work, how do you help customers out, and how you're applying machine learning to some of the problems you've encountered.
Sure thing. So I think the easiest way to start is to talk a little bit about Autodesk. We're the leading software company. It's about a 40-year-old company. We're a leading software company in a bunch of areas such as manufacturing, architecture, engineering and construction, media and entertainment, and especially in the kind of future of making concept. So the company has a real passion about this idea that AI-assisted design is in the future of everything that people do, whether they build huge buildings or 3D print hip replacements or anything in between. And I think what's exciting about the company is that along the way, you have this relationship between our customers and their software that's quite different to a lot of companies. So people really depend on our tools, on AutoCAD, on Fusion, on Revit. They really depend on those tools working really well for them, and then being able to share resources between each other and all those sorts of things. So when they run into a problem, they often really need solutions, really need help, and they can be very complex. And that's what our team does. We're there to help route those questions to the right organization and understand what kind of questions are being asked.
Tell us a little bit about what you love in your job and some of the challenges that you face day to day.
I really enjoy the opportunity to work on these kind of creative problem-solving space. So, there's two parts of the problem that you always have in data science that I think you need to think about. One is the technical challenge, and that's the more familiar one that I think a lot of people think of first, which is, how do I get a machine to answer this problem? How do I draw a graph that shows this relationship, or how do I build a statistical model to predict or analyze something? And that's one half of the problem, and it's enjoyable. But I think the other half of the problem is also fascinating, which is how do you communicate the business impact of that, and how do you understand the business problem that is the seed for that that scientific investigation. So, it's really fascinating to be able to kind of understand both how businesses and customers are working and how to translate that into technology.
Because ultimately, you have to look at the customer journey and all the different inflection points that happen there. So it takes a real sense of empathy to think, okay, well, what would the customer be thinking now? What's the challenges? And we've all been in those difficult situations where we have a challenge and we're stuck on a help desk, and the process is really, really time consuming. And for so many people, they can be frustrated. And when you deal with some companies, their customer service can be incredible. The experience can be very positive. In some cases, it makes you want to purchase more because you're so happy that they've actually solved your problem. Tell us a little about making the move from academia to industry, because you made that move, and it isn't necessarily the most straightforward to move, particularly getting the education that you did yourself.
Absolutely. So it was a combination of factors that led to me moving out of academia. I was very fortunate in that I finished my PhD with what is now the Adapt Center. So the project before that, called CNGL, was where I was finishing my PhD, and I was a funded investigator in DCU within the same center. So I had this fantastic research community around me, these colleagues who for a long time were a group of people who really, were enormously supportive, and an extraordinary group of people to work with. And one of those people had previously left to go to America, go back to America to found a company. He had the startup dream, and along the way, he and I had kept in contact, and we had been talking along, about how you would leverage research to improve the startup's prospects. And as it happened, I went over to discuss a research project with them. And in the context of that research project, they said, well, we could do a research project, or would you like a job? And, it's a difficult opportunity to pass up, but it all came from a network around the research center that I've been in, the reputation I've been able to build with that organization, and the value of personal contacts.
Yeah, the Adapt group, I've had the pleasure of being involved in some of their initiatives. So they're doing so many great projects and adding real value to industry as well. Tell us a little bit about some of the interesting trends that you're kind of looking at now, and either from afar or looking to try to apply within some of the work that you're doing, or even maybe some personal projects that you're seeing day to day.
I think the most interesting and prominent trend that I think is worth thinking about, first of all, is this idea that Autodesk has very much adopted, which is this concept of the customer company, this view that it's not anymore a situation where you sort of have a shop front that people come in and browse and they just pull stuff off the shelf and walk away. So now personalization, now individual responses, and now an understanding of the history of the user is an essential way to build a relationship that's an enduring one. And it is a two-way conversation that facilitates both users using the product, but also telling us what they want to do with the product. And I think that is a global trend that continues to be important. From a technical perspective, I think obviously deep learning is maturing rapidly. The incredibly short gap between something being published in a research paper, appearing on GitHub, and being operationalized by a company is phenomenal. I mean, you can see people putting stuff in literally days after a paper comes out. There's stuff on the products are being made available. So the ability to experiment and iterate fast on cutting edge technology has never been better from a practitioner's perspective. And then obviously the transformers, in my own area of natural language processing, the whole revolution around transformers, BERT, and actually all of the papers that have just come out around linear attention models have really demonstrated that we have an enormous amount to learn about how we understand language computing, but that we have made progress and made these huge leaps in performance in a very, very short time.
It's so exciting to see, even with OpenAI's announcement a couple of weeks back. We had case studies, we had applications, we had people sharing what they were doing, how they were applying it as well. So we held an NLP meetup, and I was asking the question: is this revolution? Is evolution? People are saying be careful not to overhype it, but you can't but help but be excited about some of the applications that are going to come on the back of this. as well. This is by no means is a perfect, right? We've had a few of the stories that were shared that kind of went off in tangents, which are kind of funny to see, but it's really, really interesting to see where it's going in the future. Any particular applications that you can see?
Yeah, so one of the most interesting things I think that is coming from a data scientist perspective, or from a commercial research perspective, is that people still don't really think about natural language processing in a way that helps them. That there are a lot of tasks that companies don't see in the way research organizations do their shared tasks, that are actually very commercially relevant and important. And I think as we go forward, as people get more practice at this, they'll begin to understand that the whole range of tools around rerouting information inside an organization and streamlining communication within an organization is a solution, that there is a whole set of tools that these things are very ready for. I mean, ethics is super important and bias is super important, and there are problems with learning from the internet. It's fair to say the internet as a collective set of opinions is probably not what you would want to demonstrate to everyone. But so long as we can begin to learn how to balance that out and take advantage of the rich understanding of the language without necessarily adopting the conceptual framework, we're in something that's useful.
Which exciting projects are you involved in at the moment that are kind of probably keeping you up at night in a good way?
There are two really good projects that I'm very interested in. One is actually that sort of task of like improving the flow within organizations, within our organization. So we have different specialist teams that support different aspects of our software in the company. So things like whether you need to do something very simple, like get a particular kind of a download, all the way up to these incredibly subtle questions about how different aerodynamic flows can happen in the shape of a car. All of those things need to go to different people inside Autodesk to get an answer, because we have these technical support agents who are experienced engineers, experienced architects, and we have people who are more conventional customer support agents, and getting that, take it to the right person fast makes enormous experience difference, enormous value, and to your point earlier, definitely like improves the relationship. A second project that I'm very interested in is that we are working very closely with our colleagues and the team that runs our forums. So we have 20 years of forum history. We have all the way back there, and we've been helping them to understand how they can encourage people who are on the cusp of being contributors, so people who are at the moment mostly reading. How can we get them to help contribute to the community in a way that helps them? So both of those things are on this idea that you can use language to understand a document, to understand a statement, and make a connection that helps everyone.
The nice thing about that is we can all know what it's like to be on both sides of those fences. So it makes it so much more practical. Slightly changing gears, coming into kind of hiring, building a data science team. Tell us a little bit about the advice you'd offer to people who want to get into this field, because it can be particularly challenging if you don't have experience, a bit of a chicken and egg problem. And then probably building out a data science team, the balance that's required. And then probably the last part of it is it's probably managing it for return on investment, because the very nature of research doesn't necessarily dovetail particularly well with return on investment, particularly with research, because there's so much of it.
Absolutely. So I might take those in the reverse order just to clarify it. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The first and most important thing is like, what is the return on investment in a data science team? Because a lot of companies make that investment and never bring it to fruition. They never get it out the door in the end. And there are all sorts of statistics out there from various companies about how this low percentage of successful projects in machine learning. And I think you have to have a clear business case, and you also have to have a clear portfolio of projects, because every experiment is not, every rocket launch doesn't get to the moon, every success is not immediate. So as you're building your muscle memory around how you take data, operationalize the quality analysis, the analysis of the exploration of that data, and the output of it, those are all things that actually have improvements inside the company if you know how to reap them. So you begin to improve your understanding of your processes, begin to improve how your company actually generates the data, and that can then fund a really good data science team. So then how do you build the team itself? I mean, I think that essentially the most important thing to realize about a data science team is it's working on this open-ended problem all the time, this open-ended infinite set of questions. So you have to build a team that can understand its own way of doing that well. So if it's a team that's very individual, then you can see these teams that are very almost like research groups. Everyone's running a project. They have a couple of people who work for them who they might share a particular project with, and that works very well if you have that group of personalities. On the other hand, our team is very collaborative, so we work very much in a sharing way. We all share our work, we share our experiences, we share our code. That works well if that's the way. But the key thing is to recognize which side of the fence you're on and how to build it. And then when you come to hiring and when you come to being hired, realize what you have to offer. So it's what technical things do you know? What are you an expert on? What can you realize? But also, how do you like to work, or how do you think you want to like to work? And how can you be a culture add to a team? Which is to say, you don't have to come into a team and rigidly follow what they do, but you do want to be able to be in a situation where it's compatible with how you want to work and how you like to conduct your days. And I think that's the essential challenge that you're trying to do when you're in an interview. And it's very hard because, especially with early jobs, all you really want is to get there and get in the door and get it. But for long-term career success, I think it's important to think about that question of how you will be a culture add.
It's a really nice way how you phrase this, a culture add, because we've all built and managed teams and there's been probably culture detractors, right? And they don't necessarily come into this world wanting to be culture detractors. It's just how they communicate messages or how they manage stress, and it can have a dominoes effect on other people as well. So I think the very nature of data science, data engineering is 90% of your time you're cleaning or transforming data, and 10% of the time you're probably complaining about doing that, right? So the reality is that you're trying to audit what the marketplace is like, and then highlight what you've got, and having that knowledge to say, listen, I know I don't have experience in X, Y, and Z, but I do bring this to the table. Here's a solution to a problem I got frustrated about myself in my local area, and this is how I've gone about coming up with a solution. And it can work. I've seen some innovative ones where people were getting frustrated that their blueberries were going off in the supermarkets that they were going to, and then they started to do some computer vision models on them and the perfect way to keep them. And I had another person who had traffic light sequences, and he was getting frustrated with that in his local area, and he was trying to show different areas. But these are ways to step out from the crowd as well. And then try.
The other thing that's very important there, I think, from a individual perspective, is it's important for people to be able to show that they can do the practical as well as the theoretical, and that they have some ability to translate those things, because I think that's something that a lot of managers are looking for, that they run into, because no one arrives intending to misbehave in a company, or it's rare, right? But what happens is that there's either a misaligned incentive or a misaligned expectation, and those are the seeds that lead to conflict.
Yeah, and they're particularly challenging ones to reverse, because those seeds are usually planted. You've been listening to Alex O'Connor, lead data scientist at Autodesk, and for the AI Mentors podcast, I'm your host, Mark Kelly. Alex, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure.
Get the Alldus advantage. Become a member of the Alldus community and enjoy some of the following: AI meetups. Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston, and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Alldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career, and more. Become an Alldus member and get the Alldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.alldus.com. That's www.alldus.com. Alldus International, empowering through AI.